Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jen Peacock, and I serve as the Policy Director at the Michigan Center for Youth Justice, or MCYJ. MCYJ is a nonprofit organization committed to advancing policies and practices that create a fair and effective justice system for Michigan's children, youth, and young adults. To kick things off, here's a little bit of context. In 2023, the Lieutenant Governor signed the Justice for Kids and Communities package into law, reforming and effectively overhauling our juvenile justice system. These new laws are just some of the Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force's recommendations to improve this system. The reforms as a whole work to ensure our young people have a floor of care, some consistency across a decentralized system, and invest in alternatives to detention as a particular emphasis point. So we'll turn to kind of the purpose of the poll. For us as a statewide group, we really wanted to be informed on not only elements of the most recent legislative changes, but really hear opinions directly from community relating to juvenile justice. We had a few areas that were top of mind for us, including juvenile defense, workforce development, data, and community-based care. These are all the topics we'll be digging into today. Here you can see our methodology that the group marketing resource group used to approach this statewide poll. I also want to flag this is far more robust, but for the sake of time, we really wanted to condense it down to this slide. So MRG conducted a 600-person survey across our state. All of these folks were registered Michigan voters, and a majority of folks were contacted by cell phone numbers. The primary survey, so the bulk of our questions, occurred in March of 2024, while an additional few questions were asked to the same sample size in July. We'll start digging into the first topic, which is juvenile defense. We thought because this is, at the time of recording, a very active legislative priority for not only us, but also other juvenile justice reform stakeholders, we could lend a little bit of background. So the task force found Michigan has no centralized structure and minimal standards, supports, or resources statewide for juvenile public defense. We see an unevenness as to when counsel is appointed and young people's access to trained and qualified defenders. Now, House Bill 4630, which was specifically referenced for some of our polling questions, was a key component of the Justice for Kids and Communities bill package, but unfortunately, it did not advance out of the Michigan State Senate. So in simplest terms, you can perceive this bill as ensuring that the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, or the MIDC, has the power and ability to consistently ensure our young folks have quality indigent defense services. Now, we'll dig into the first prompt that we'll review today. So after hearing that the legislation could reduce reoffending and provide youth with the help they need to become more successful members in our community, 77% of respondents indicated they are more likely to support the legislation. So of those 77%, we can see here where those supporters are split across our state. So we're seeing some pretty high and consistent support regardless of the geographic region here. Additionally, here's a breakdown of political affiliations of those supporters. So we're seeing some consistent support in both Republican and independents, while also seeing a high number of folks that identify as Democrats in that support breakdown. The polling reveals that a significant majority, 77.8%, agree that elected officials in the Michigan State Legislature have a responsibility to pass legislation ensuring that youth in the juvenile defense system receive the same resources as adults. So again, we'll see that pretty high and consistent spread of those supporters across our state. And now we'll see that the data is really showing that Michiganders can come together in a bipartisan way to support ensuring that our justice-impacted young people have those rights to juvenile defense and equitable legal representation upheld. Another area we'll start to dig into as we shift gears will be workforce development. So the polling results show a significant majority, 83%, agree that workforce development programs serve as preventative and rehabilitative care for youth at risk of becoming involved in the juvenile justice system. This belief is widely held across political affiliations, which we see here on the screen. So that range from 77% to 85%. We can also see for the kind of breakdown of data on race affiliation, really strong numbers, that there's widespread agreement that workforce development programs are really essential in preventing and rehabilitating youth at risk of becoming or currently becoming involved in the juvenile justice system. So moving along, the polling results indicate overwhelming support, with 92% of respondents agreeing that youth in or at risk of becoming involved in the juvenile justice system should be given workforce development opportunities to promote safer communities. This support in particular is consistent across various geographic regions and genders, which we'll take a look at next. So we can see here very strong numbers both across in the spread across those supporters in our state, ranging from 88% to as high as 94%. We also see very similar gender breakdown of those agreeable folks. Now we'll kind of shift gears into profiling our data transparency results. The polling results reveal that a substantial majority, 90%, agree that the legislature should require regular, publicly available reports on juvenile justice system programs, services, and outcomes. This is consistently supported across different geographic regions and political affiliations. So we can see here very robust support in party affiliation, breakdown of agreement, and the geographic breakdown of agreement, which really tells us that this is a kind of core, let's see, what's the proper word? Kind of a collaborative and very agreeable topic in particular for stakeholders across the state of Michigan. The polling results indicate strong support, with 86% of respondents agreeing that increasing transparency in juvenile justice data would positively impact communities by enhancing accountability, supporting reform efforts, and ensuring equitable youth outcomes for all youth, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. Now, sadly, for the sake of time, we won't go too far in the weeds on this one, but I did want to highlight that a majority of folks see a lot of value in when it comes to increasing transparency. The next area we'll talk about is community-based care. And so for some context, the Justice for Kids and Communities legislative package includes some reforms to the Child Care Fund. The Child Care Fund is the primary funding source for Michigan's juvenile justice system. So with this in mind, the legislation increased the reimbursement rate for those alternatives to detention and community-based care services. So this in particular for us was a really valuable aspect of the poll to really let us get a sense of how our community is feeling about the use of community-based care. Because for us and many community providers, we know that this is an incredibly successful tool to ensure our young people and their families get their needs met and ensure that they have access to rehabilitative services. And this is something that we want to see across our state, regardless of your geographic location. And so we were really excited to get these results in particular because an overwhelming amount of folks support, with 93% agreeing that more community-based alternatives such as drug use treatment, counseling, and family therapy should be available to youth in the juvenile justice system. The support is widespread across these different kind of breakdown buckets we see here. So political affiliation, strong, those supporters. We had some diversity with 93% of Republicans, 92% of independents, and 97% of Democrats broken down in their in that agreement of saying we see the benefits of community-based care. We also, again, see really strong numbers all across our state with folks really wanting to provide our young folks with these particular services. And now we also see alignment on age affiliation. So really, truly, regardless of age, folks are seeing that community-based care is of significant value to our young folks and their families. And across gender, we're also seeing that. And so it's really showing and highlighting that to many Michiganders, there's a clear importance of investing in those rehabilitative options as opposed to out-of-home placement. So now we'll kind of pause here and we'll kind of pivot to how folks can use this data, right? Because for us, it's very helpful to inform our legislative efforts, but we also want to make sure that viewers like you can also access this for not only local and statewide policy, but for informing those efforts to really expand our juvenile justice system's local services in a robust way. And so first, I just want to share this from the marketing resource group regarding social messaging and how they really found that really digging in on juvenile justice as a whole compared to things like fiscal impacts or political mentions moved folks more, and folks found it more agreeable to discuss those things rather than nitty-gritty on legislation or anything that could be perceived as divisive in our political system. So really shifting to language like community-based alternatives or safer communities, and really leaning into the positive of these changes as opposed to anything fiscal or hyper-political, really helped increase and bump up that support for these participants who were called up on the poll. For those advocates, it's kind of two-pronged. So in particular, if you're doing very targeted advocacy in your local region, you can really use this data, particularly for community-based alternatives and engaging in conversation about data collection and transparency in the juvenile justice system. We can really show that this is something that is a bipartisan, these are really bipartisan topics, and really push folks to really push those decision makers into shifting and aligning with the community at hand. And I also think that in the context of very local organization, they can use this data for policy changes, writing their representatives, or also when engaging in public forums and conversations, really sharing with folks directly, like, hey, we're a strong percentage of our region really wants more community-based programs. Where do you stand on these services? It can create a really good and rich dialogue. Now, in the context of public awareness and public education, emphasizing there is that broad support, again, helping depoliticize these various topics by showing the different political and demographic groups that support is also very helpful. And again, really tailoring your message to your particular region can also inform those local education programs. And also, I do think it's relevant to discuss our community providers for a moment. So we know that there are many really fantastic local providers that are giving those family therapy services and other out-of-home placement opportunities for our kids. And so really encouraging courts, providers to use this data to assess their program offerings and really making sure, are we providing what constituents and our community neighbors want for our young folks to hopefully push and advocate for expansion of workforce development programs, alternatives to detention, and more. And so with that in mind, you can visit our website and miyouthjustice.org and find information sheets regarding these various polling data and metrics broken down by these topics. I'll also say that you can always reach out to me. My email's right here, and I am always happy to customize and break down data for you and really make sure that if you want to dig in on, let's say, workforce development programs for potentially justice-involved youth, we make sure that you have the metrics that you need to support your community conversations. And I'm always happy to do a deep dive on these topics as well. So this has been kind of a summary of the various topics from our polling webinar today. We really appreciate your support. Please reach out if you have any questions regarding this topic, and have a great day.